Hey everybody, today Rahdo talks through podcast number 6, and here we are folks at the halfway mark. In my Kickstarter campaign this year, I promised 12 episodes and we've made it to number 6. Oh my gosh, just half a year left to go. Oh boy, well, let's get right into it. So let's just stick to the format, shall we? Starting with what have we been playing lately? And now that's an interesting question. Actually, the last podcast, I did a special where all I did was talk about all the potential games of Essen. So I didn't really do a what have we been playing. So in theory, I should have 2 months worth of what have we been playing, right? Well, not exactly, because most of what we've been playing, I've already done run-throughs for. So it doesn't really feel like it makes much sense to me to repeat that. So I'm going to try and talk about some of the stuff we have encountered recently that is not going to be making it in video form. That's pretty much how I focus. And so let's first of all start with some of the games I actually got to play at Essen this year. And I've got a modest list, starting with Broom Service, actually. I have to admit, I've wanted to try that quite a bit because, it's from the co-designer Alexander Pfister. I'm not sure if I'm saying his name correctly, but I've loved some of his other recent games, and of course this game got the Kennerspiel for this year, so I already knew it was going to be a fantastic game, but I've been hesitant to try it because it's a remake of another game that I cannot remember the name of right now that originally only allowed for 3 players or more. And so suddenly they've reprinted it and it's a 2-player game. So I always was a little bit nervous if it would work that well with 2. And as well, it features a central mechanism that I was kind of put off by, and just because of kind of the meanness factor. But still, what the heck? I was at Essen, me and a friend of mine, Karthik, we were walking by a table, or a booth that had it set up to demo, and no one was sitting there, so what the heck? We both wanted to give it a try, and we sat down, and we played about half a game to get a feel for what it's like. And I gotta say, I can see why it got the Kennerspiel. It's a really solid, very well-designed game, very, very clever, and I very much admired it. But oh, and we did try it as a 2-player game, and I would definitely say it worked well as a 2-player game. I was surprised. It did work very well. Although, to be fair, I don't understand why the game didn't do anything to kind of tighten the board up. There was no 2-player side of the map, nor was there any sort of, hey, everything that's outside of this dotted line, ignore it in a 2-player game. So that was really kind of weird. It could be a much, much, much better 2-player game if they had just cordoned off, say, a third of the board. It's the same problem that Terra Mystica has, where it should work as a 2-player game, but they just don't bother tightening the board up. And they didn't do that with Broom Service, and I'm really quite surprised by that. But even still, in spite of that, it was a solid game. Because even though Karthik and I never got anywhere close to each other, there was never any direct competition for, all the terrain, all the territory on the board we were trying to get control of, there was still interesting interaction, because the crux of Broom Service is every turn, or every round, we have several different actions we can do. We all have a deck of the exact same cards, and we're going to play cards, and we choose them in secret, and then we start revealing them one after another. So you got to choose before you know what your opponent is going to do. And the tricky thing is, when you reveal it, you have to decide, are you going to do the weak version of the action on that card, which maybe just gives you a little bit of resources, or are you going to do the brave? There's like the brave and the cowardly version. And so if you choose the brave version, you have the potential to get a huge influx. But here's the thing. After you reveal your card and you choose whether it's brave or not, if anybody else played the same card that round, they have to reveal if they played it. And if they did, and you chose to be brave, you get nothing. You get nothing, sir. And that's a really interesting thing. It's very, very tense, because the crux of the game is anticipating what you think your opponents are going to do. Because the design is very brilliant. I mean, it's very, very obvious looking at the board, looking at the situation. You can have a pretty good idea of what is the most important thing for your opponent to do any given time. And so you can guess, well, it's very, very likely they're going to do that. So I should stay away from that because I'm the first player and I'm going to be the one who has to declare brave, and I won't, or whatever. But then they know you know that, so are they going to zig when you expect them to zag? And all of that stuff works very nicely. And so I thought it was a very, very solid game. And, it's not like it's a mean attack game or anything like that. But even still, I think the overall feeling of the game is a bit harsh and punishing, because what very quickly happened was, as Karthik and I were playing, I was able to anticipate what he was going to do, and I could make choices specifically designed to hurt him if he decided to be brave. And so I could actually build a strategy out of that. And I'm not saying I did, but in spite of that, as we played, I was able to stream ahead because I was choosing actions that, I was able to get bravely and not have to worry about losing out anything. And he was trying to be brave, and he just got hammered time after time after time. When he would choose to be brave doing something, and I would say, "Oh, Karthik, why did you choose to be brave?" Because I now have to destroy it. And so, I quickly streamed into the lead. And now, to be fair, I think the game is long enough that, it's going to balance out. And sooner or later, I didn't really get the impression that I had destroyed Karthik or was in kind of runaway leader or anything like that. But the thing that bugged me was every time, and it happened several times in a row, and if anybody out there knows Karthik, you can confirm this with him. I felt terrible every time he ended up achieving nothing. Because what would be really bad is, I think it's 3 cards you play. And, you play your first card, you get something you need. You play your second card, you get something you need. You play your third card, and you got all the stuff you needed from the first 2 cards to do the third action. And, oh no, the second action, you didn't get what you needed because you got nothing because of the bravery thing. And now your third card is useless. And that was happening to Karthik. And I just kept saying, "Oh my God, this is terrible. I feel so bad." And it wasn't my fault. I didn't even try to screw him. I just accidentally screwed him. And meanwhile, I was actually doing very well. And while the game was solid, and I think the game was designed so that I should have been engaging in some very healthy schadenfreude, reveling in the fact that he was drowning. But for me, I just felt terrible because indirectly I had caused that. And so that, as I expected, Broom Service was not really a game that I think Jen and I will ever enjoy, because we can't take pleasure in the suffering of others. And in fact, we tend to suffer along with them. Heck, that was my top 10 topic 2 podcasts ago. And so that's why Broom Service, I think, will never be a goer for us, even though I do think it's brilliantly designed. Could make for a really great Gateway or Gateway Plus game. So I was really glad to play it, because now I know I don't need to play it anymore. My suspicions were confirmed. And then moving on to some other stuff I got a chance to play. I got to sit down for a prototype of Fog of Love, which is a relationship simulation Euro. And oh my gosh, this game is brilliant. I cannot wait to get a chance to play a full copy of it. Now, my understanding is I think it's going to go into Kickstarter early next year. And I told him, please send me a prototype. I would love to cover it, because just from what little I saw, we ran through a couple of rounds. I got to see some of the actions you can do, some of the ramifications for choices you make, and it was stunning to me. Too much to go into. There were so many really, really, really clever design decisions in this game. But suffice to say, it is a relationship simulation. It basically, every round, players are going to play cards that ask questions. And like one of the questions I saw was your significant other, because again, you and I, when we're playing this game, we are a couple, we're a significant other. The game never goes into whether we're gay or straight or any of that. It's up to the players to decide all of that. Everything's nice and gender neutral. But so one of the cards was that, got played on me. Your spouse really would love to see you get a tattoo. And then I have to make the choice. Do I want to or not? And now, as part of setup, we got to choose through kind of a card drafting system a set of qualities, of characteristics, of character traits that define who each of us are. And, so I might have a character trait that is not happy about getting tattoos. And my partner might have a character trait that is very, very happy with that because they're wild or they're creative or they're artistic. And I might be buttoned up or whatever. I don't remember all the character traits. So we have these character traits that define who we are. And in fact, when I was choosing mine, I was choosing them based on who I myself am as a person. I think that was very nice. It gave me a really great chance. Well, I wasn't role-playing. I made a character who kind of reflects me. And so, but the interesting thing about that card was, my partner played it on me, and I have to choose. And the thing is, if I choose to get a tattoo, and if I recall, I think there's several choices. So you can say yes, you can say no, you can say kind of a maybe, you can kind of do a compromise thing. But whatever I choose is going to affect the stats for both of us, our happiness, our fulfillment, all these different stats that are almost kind of like The Sims. And the thing is, the whole point of this game in a perfect world is to play it cooperatively and ensure at the end of the game we have a thriving and successful and healthy relationship where both of us are satisfied and fulfilled. And to do that, we have to make choices that not only improve our life stats, but also improve our partner's life stats. But the thing is, these questions generally don't make it that easy. If I take the tattoo, I might make my partner very happy and make myself kind of sad. And can I afford to do that? Because here's the thing. We also have secret objectives of what we want to get out of the relationship. We can never say what these are, but if we pay attention to the choices our partners make, we can start to intuit who they are and what it is they want out of the relationship. So, do I make choices that might hurt my character, but will help my partner? And maybe I can do that because I know, basically in this relationship, do I compromise to make my partner happier? And, honestly, that was mind-blowing. I mean, Jen and I, we've been married for over 20 years now. The key to a successful relationship is communication and compromise. And this game is all about communication and compromise. Communication in the form of trying to figure out who your partner is, what they want out of life. It was a brilliant game. It was a mind-boggling game, and I can't wait to try it. I can't wait to play it with Jen. It looked stunning. And, the production values were very, very nice, too. It looks like an amazing game, Fog of Love. Next up, I got to sit down with Mac Gerdts for about an hour and a half and play a prototype of his big next upcoming game, Steamship Company. And I gotta say, that was a treat. He was a very warm, charming guy. We actually spent a lot of time just kind of chatting about, his life and about designing board games. He's actually a government employee, a government accountant. I wasn't quite sure exactly. His English was his German accent was very thick, and I understood him for the most part, but Essen is loud. But he was a really interesting guy, and we talked a lot about his work and how that reflected in his games and what he likes about making games. And that was a treat for me because I am a huge Mac Gerdts junkie. I love Navigator. We love Concordia. Hamburgum is fantastic. I mean, we really definitely admire and respect his game. So I was really stoked just to play his latest game well before it comes out. And this game he has been working on for years. This is kind of like, he didn't come out and say this, but I kind of got the impression he's very, very proud of this. And for him, this is like, is it going to be his magnum opus? I'm not sure. But the game itself was very, very good. And I have to admit, really kind of unlike anything I've ever played before. Because I have no real experience with 18xx games. Games where a stock market, a communal stock market, is a big, big part of the overall experience. And, as industrialists, we are making investments into companies, and therefore we want to see these companies succeed. And other people, as I make a company succeed, then other people start investing in it to ride on my coattails. This game has that in spades. It's a very, very big part of the game. And I have to admit, since I personally didn't have much experience with it, that was very, very tough for me to get my head around how to make smart decisions that benefited me more than anybody else. And the interesting thing too is probably the most surprising thing about Steamship Company is it's a worker placement game. It is not a Rondel game. It is not an alternative to Rondel games. It is totally brand new virgin territory for Mac Gerdts. It's worker placement. It's worker placement with some of the same type of subject matter he's covered before, of building ships, and this game basically kind of covers a broad sweep of history as shipping technology comes up from schooners all the way up to steamships. So it covers, I forget what it was, 200 years, and we go through several ages as transportation technology gets better and better, and we are investing in these companies. And all the companies, the steamship companies in the game, are based on real historical steamship companies. So there was a lot of interesting history to it, and the gameplay was really sharp. And as players, there is a lot of interactivity between players because one player might really, really focus a lot on building ships, and one player might focus a lot on, getting goods into position so that another player could focus a lot on moving those goods from one part of the world to another part of the world, depending on what their technology is. So there was a lot of synergy, and there was a lot of, the game got into a rhythm. Okay, well, I'm particularly good at this, and this is my part of the ecosystem. Everybody relies on me when it comes around to my turn to achieve this, because if I don't, the whole clockwork system, economy that we have built together falls apart. And I found it fascinating and very, very challenging. I mean, everybody else at the table besides me were kind of a bit more comfortable with this kind of thing. So by the time we finished playing, and again, we didn't finish this, but I was starting to get the hang of it. It's a very, very sharp game. I was not confident it would work that well with two, in all honesty. I asked Mac, and I didn't really get a definitive yes. This is the greatest two-player game I've ever made. It really struck me as the main focus because there is all this synergy and this economy that players build up. So it remains to be seen how well it's going to be as a two-player game, but it's definitely brilliant. And for the record, Matt Gertz is a warm, wonderful, funny, and charismatic guy, and I would happily sit down and play a game with him anytime. So that was Steamship Company. See, also, I got to sit down and get a quick demo of the first expansion for Nations, the dice game, and oh my gosh, this is must-has. I cannot wait to get it now because we already really like Nations, the dice game, and the expansion does a lot of stuff. I'm not even going to spend time going into all of it. Honestly, it's been a month now. I don't even remember everything that I saw, but I saw what I wanted to see, which was new nations that have unique starting situations. And that right there, that's all I want. Because that's a big part of its big brother. Nations is getting all these asymmetrical societies that you're building up with different specialities and all that. And now that is coming to Nations, the dice game, with a whole bunch of new nations that you get to build up. But then there was a bunch more stuff on top of that, but I'm sure things will start getting announced about it. I have no idea when the game is coming out. Sometime next year. It was a really early version I saw, but oh my gosh, I can't wait for Nations, the dice game expansion, which had a name, and for the life of me, I can't remember it now. Should have written it down. But anyway, that was very, very cool. Jen, by the way, was at Essen this year, and she spent most of her time at her booth. The fine folks at Ludi Creations donated to Jen a table. They had a very, very big booth, a big double-sized booth, and and as they had demos running, they were very, very popular. I know they sold out of several of the games. They had a really great show, and so it was amazing for them to literally, just because they like her, give one of their tables to Jen, so they weren't demoing on it, and so she spent most of the show with a lot of her glass pieces set up on display, selling them, talking to people, and she had an absolutely wonderful time. She's going to come on the podcast a little bit later. I'll see if she wants to talk at all about that, but she spent most of her time there, had just an amazing time. One of the best, Jen's been doing trade shows selling her glassware for years. This was one of the best she had ever had. And so she's very, very thankful to Ludi Creations. But she did every once in a while get away from the booth, and we got to go and have lunch together and whatnot. And we had planned to actually try to get away at the same time from me going around talking to people and her, selling glass to play some games. And one of them was going to be Guilds of London. And as it turns out, I was running late, so Jen made it to Surprise Stairs' booth and sat down with Tony. And by the time I got there, they had already started kind of going through the game. And so I was a little late and I didn't get to play, but I got to sit there while Jen played a few rounds of Guild of London with Tony, and it looked fantastic. Tony had like a final production copy of the game. It was supposed to be for sale at Essen, but I guess some printing problem went wrong, and so they didn't have it for sale, but they did have a full final release, and it looked gorgeous. You remember, I did a preview video of Guilds of London like 2 years ago at Essen when it was just really rough and ready. The final product looks fantastic. Jen had a fantastic time playing it. She thought it was great. It was interesting. I was surprised. Since I've seen it, there was one big new feature that was added, which was kind of a sort of take that kind of element where players have control over neutral
pawns that you can basically, it's an area majority game, and okay, I'm trying to get majority of this guild, you're trying to get majority of this guild, and so it was a pretty straightforward tug of war originally, and it worked well 2 players when I played it 2 years ago, but now they've added these neutral things. At the last second, you can send them in specifically to kick your opponents out, and Jen thought it was fine, but of course Jen is a little bit more cutthroat than I am. And so I'm looking forward to see how it works in the final game, but Jen was very, very impressed by Guilds of London. Speaking of Jen, she has just gotten back from shopping. So I've got more games we've been playing to talk about, but I'm going to have to take a break and help her put all the groceries away, folks. So I'll be right back in a second. Hold on. Okay, that's all taken care of. And oh my gosh, folks, this is a sad, sad day. I guess I knew this, but I forgot. One of the things Jen went out to pick up was some reading glasses. I think I put it on my head because when she said she was going to pick some, I'm like, don't need reading glasses. That's ridiculous. What, I'm just 46. It's no big deal. I can read fine. And she brings them back, and she's talking about how, she works really close up with her glass when she's making glass pieces. So she was talking about how she needed for that. And I just tried them on and just looked at the receipt from the grocery store, and oh my God, I had no idea. I'm blind at 6 inches. I just, I've always thought I could read just fine, but as soon as you put those on, suddenly just everything snaps into clarity. Oh no, folks, I'm getting old. Oh, that's so sad. But anyway, so back to what have we been playing lately. Let's see. Right. So, talking more about stuff I was trying to play at Essen, I was very, very excited to try out Uwe Rosenberg's game, Fest für Odin, which is his next really big, heavy, complex, whole bunch of keeping plates spinning in the air Euro-style game. And I was so excited about this, I actually contacted the publisher before the show and scheduled a time because I wanted to get there so much. So I show up at the appointed time, talk to a guy, and he said, "Oh, I'm so sorry, we forgot. And of course, that window was completely booked. So they said, well, if you like, you can watch. I'm like, no, I don't want to watch, I want to play. And so unfortunately, Fest für Odin was a miss, which broke my heart. But I took some solace in the fact that we did pick up Hengist, which was Uwe Rosenberg's other game that was for sale at the show. And I mention this because since we got back, Jen and I, we have played it a couple of times, and I don't think I'm going to be doing a run-through for it, in all honesty, because, wow, I just don't know what to think about that game, but it really fell so flat with us. I mean, we had to play it twice. First time we're like, geez, did we play something wrong? And, to be fair, the rule book is terrible. The English rule book is really incomplete. I had to do a lot of reading on Board Game Geek to understand what the rule books, leave out. But then we tried it again, confident we were playing correctly, and it's just like, geez, this is an Uwe Rosenberg game? I just don't know. In fact, I'm really nervous about it. But fortunately, Michael Wiesner, MeWe, who does a run-through show similar to mine, but his run-throughs, he completely finishes games, and he actually edits his videos, so it's nothing but the facts, man. He just makes choices and goes. So they're like, kind of like my run-throughs on steroids. They just go, and he covers a lot of, the latest cool Euros coming from Germany. And so I know he's going to be doing a run-through for it very quickly, and I cannot wait to see that, because I refuse to believe that Uwe Rosenberg would make such a game. But right now, Hengist just totally fell flat with us, and I'm hoping we just missed something. MeWe, help me. You're my only hope. And so we'll be watching for his run-through soon. But let's see, what else we got? While I was at the show, I got to sit down with the folks from iGames, a Ukrainian publisher, who were the original developers, and I talked to the original designer, or co-designer if I recall correctly, of Mysterium. And it was really, really cool because I got to see a close-up of all the new card art that is coming for their new expansion, and it's just gorgeous. It's just so lovely. I didn't really get the impression there was any kind of new changes to anything to gameplay. It was just a whole bunch of new cards that just looked fantastic, both surreal art cards, but also murder suspect type cards as well. So it looked like it was going to add a lot of replayability to the base game. So it just looked fantastic. I was very happy I spent some time looking at all of them because they were just gorgeous. And let's see. Oh, and then the last game I can think of that I played, and this one had not planned to, but I remember I mentioned Jen was working her booth at the Ludi Creations, or working her table at the Ludi Creations booth. And so one time I swung back by and I wanted to talk to her, but she was completely swamped with people, so I was waiting. And while I was waiting for her, I did a quick little 2-player full game playthrough of Microfilms, which is a little microgame version of Redacted, which is a game I did a run-through for last year. And I'd been worried. I like the idea of Microfilms. It's a game where we're all a bunch of spies, and none of us know if our nations are allied with each other. So I might be the Russians, and you might be the Americans, and another player might be the British. And the thing is, we all have our secret objective we're trying to do, but we don't know, who are you, player sitting across the table from me, and are we working together? Because all that information got lost on the way to the mission. And whereas Redacted took place at a party at an embassy, a big party, and you were sneaking all around the building and breaking into rooms and turning out lights, and it was a very, very cool game. And it worked okay with 2, but it was really much, much better with more. Microfilms takes that same basic idea, but really shrinks it down. It is a micro game. It's just a less than 2 dozen cards, and its players are now spies at a casino, and all the intrigue happens over a baccarat table or something like that. So it's the micro game is a card game about a card game. They were all very fond of saying, so it's very meta in that regard. But I played as a 2-player game, and after I kind of got the gist of what was happening, I thought it actually worked really well. So I picked up a copy while I was there, and I'm looking forward to doing a run-through for it. And so I'm really happy that Jen was completely swamped, because a game that was totally off my radar turned out to be quite nice. And so that was really it for what I got to play firsthand at Essen. And ever since we've gotten back, well, we've just been trying to burn through play and film as many games as possible, because this month I am flying out to Dallas to go to Board Game Geek Con for the first time. And then after I spend a week in Dallas, I'm going to spend 2 more weeks in the Pacific Northwest in the Seattle area to visit my mom, because I haven't seen her for several years. So there's going to be a 4-week period of time where my output for run-throughs is going to really take a nosedive, just to warn everybody so that's coming up. So we're trying to get as many games covered before that as possible. So we've just been burning through games as quickly as we can. And you can see I've been doing a run-through most every day since we've been back. Although it's been hard, because 2 games we've been playing repeatedly are 504 and Pandemic Legacy. Now, I've already done my run-through for Pandemic Legacy. I did it as a full 4-player with 4 actual human players on camera for the first time. And Jen, I love it. I mean, it's total no-brainer. It is the game of the year. It's absolutely stunning, absolutely amazing. Jen and I, we have 4 more months to get through before we finish it. And when we actually finish those last 4, I'm hoping to finish it this week. I'll do a follow-up to my original run-through to talk about, anything else that comes up, specifically, because I think a lot of people are curious, does the game have legs after you finish it? And honestly, I don't know. I've heard some people say, yeah, you can play it. I've heard some people say, yeah, it's really done. Once you finish it, you can't play it anymore. So I'll definitely be talking about that. And I'll also probably do a spoiler-heavy, because my run-through, I completely avoid spoilers, but I'll do a spoiler-heavy final thoughts video as well, where you should only listen if you don't care about playing the game, or if you've already played it and you're just kind of curious about Jen's and my real experience, where I go into detail about some of the events that happened to us and how they made us feel and how we responded to them, because, oh my God, it's just such an amazing experience. I mean, I've said it before and I'll say it again, in my 46 years of life on this planet playing games, ever since I was a wee bairn, I would have to say Pandemic Legacy has given me the best gaming experiences of my life so far. Just absolutely amazing game. But it has taken a lot of time, because really, to be able to do this run through, I had to play it a lot to be able to really speak intelligently about it. And the same thing is true for 504. I've actually played it now with 4 players once, and Jen and I, we've played several different 2-player combinations of it, and I'm trying to get a good enough idea so I can talk broadly about the entire system. The game itself is brilliant. It is a mad scientist concoction of being able to take this flip book that mixes up 9 different genres of gameplay: pick up and deliver, stock markets, warfare, majorities, privileges, road network building, and a few others. There's 9 in total, and every time you play, you pick 3 of these different styles of gameplay, and they get mashed together into a completely new game, and that's where a game gets its title. There are 504 unique games you can play in this box. And, I mean, I gotta say, of all the games Jen and I have played, it has been unique every time. Even just taking the same 3 modules and, using the exact same 3, but in a different order. So, like, if you had majorities in space 1 and privileges in space 2 and road building in space 3, in slot number 3, it becomes a radically different game if you make road building into slot 1 and majorities into slot 2 and privileges in slot 3. It's stunning to me. And now the thing is, while every game we've played works, I think the best game we've had so far was playing it as a full 4-player game, because Jen and I have yet to find a really compelling 2-player scenario. And it really does feel like the game is much like most of Friedemann Friese. This is the designer Friedemann Friese, who made Power Grid, most famously, but he's made a lot of games over the year. And really, Friedemann Friese is not widely known for making really rock-solid 2-player gameplay scenarios. And so far, we've been struggling to find a really good 2-player game in 504. And I really do want to find at least one before I do a run-through. But I'm running out of time, folks, because soon I'll be on the plane, and I really want to get it filmed before I go. But it's been... I've definitely enjoyed. Actually, it's interesting. I think I have the most fun with 504 once I've actually created the Mad Libs concoction of different game mechanisms, and then I read how the rules are going to work and how this game is going to play and how it's going to be different. And that's the most fun, just discovering, wow, how's this game going to play? But then the games themselves, like I said, because we're playing 2-player, they just don't. I mean, the game clearly wants to have more players. But I'll talk more about that pretty soon. And let's see. I think that covers it for the games we've been playing. And we've been playing a whole bunch more games, but as soon as we play them, I've been doing run-throughs, so I won't go into any of those. But that's it, folks. There is the first topic for podcast number 6. What have we been playing lately? And now I am going to take a break, but we'll be right back to move on to the next topic. Hold on to your horses. Okay, folks, you still have your horses? Were they properly held? Excellent. Good thing I actually threw that out there for you. So let's move on now to questions and answers. We'll put this on. And I'm actually really surprised. I haven't done question and answers for months now. And yet, since the last Q&A, I have only gotten 5 questions. And now, to be fair, in the last podcast, I think I forgot to remind everybody what the email address is. So if you have any questions for me about Rahdo Runs Through or about games or about life in general, please, or if you have questions for Jen for that matter, she can jump in and answer some questions. So if you have questions for either of us, send them to questions@rahdo.com. Questions, ampersand, no, not ampersand, @ symbol, whatever you call that, questions@rahdo.com, because, what the heck, only 5 in 2 months. But still, well, I will answer these now to the best of my ability. Although, actually, one thing I will say, because, let's see, actually, this first question I'm looking at right now, I'm going to say, for the most part, if you could have questions be something other than, hey, what kind of game do you recommend for X, Y, or Z? Because those are... To answer a question like that, I really have to spend a lot of time thinking about it, and really, you're better off taking a question like that to my guild at guild.rahdo.com, http://guild.rahdo.com. There are a whole bunch of people who post regularly on my guild who have kind of the same game temperament as me and Jen. As a general rule, we tend to like less conflict-laden games. We like, heavier Euro-y type games. My guild has a place to congregate for people who like that kind of thing. So if you find yourself liking those kind of games and you have questions about what game should you get next, go ask them at guild.rahdo.com. But in the meantime, hey, what is the first question? Well, it is from Chris, who asks, after much uncertainty, my girlfriend and I finally found our favorite game style is multiplayer solitaire. Well done, Chris. It is the best game style. We mostly play Subdivision now with occasional blueprints. I want to find more such games, but the multiplayer solitaire genre is much maligned, so good information is scarce. What are your recommendations? Would an open sandbox game like Fields of Arle count as multiplayer solitaire? Well, I think you know what my answer is because I actually just kind of gave it before I even read the question. Again, go to the guild.rahdo.com in your browser, ask away, and you'll get answers from me and from a whole bunch of people who have tons and tons of really good suggestions. And I mean, this is like a perfect example because I'm looking at my wall of games right now, and heck, 2/3 of the games on my wall are multiplayer solitaire because Jen and I love multiplayer solitaire. It is not maligned in our house, and I mean, I wouldn't even know where to start. I mean, you play Subdivision, you play Blueprint, so that means you have a predilection towards city-building games, I suppose. There's several I could mention. But like I said, Chris, sorry, I'm going to totally punt on this. Guild.rahdo.com. Seek it out, and you will find what you're looking for. So that is my answer. And although actually, your other question, would an open sandbox game like Field of Arle count as multiplayer solitaire? Yes, I would say so. The two really kind of go hand in hand. If it's a game where it's wide open and you can do whatever you want, if it's a game like Field of Arle where you're not bumping heads too much with your opponent, it's a perfect multiplayer solitaire. Although, to be fair, Fields of Arle can get a little bit competitive. Things can get tight. So that one is less multiplayer solitaire than some games, like, say, Caverna for that matter. But anyway, let's move on to the next question from Chental. Who, by the way, Chental is one of the folks that Jen met at her stall at Essen this year. We'll be talking about that in a little bit. I'm going to try and get Jen on the microphone so she can talk about her experience at Essen. But Chental was a lovely lady who I think bought some pieces, but also gave Jen these little handcrafted figurines of a beagle and a couple of mice sitting in front of thimbles or something like that, and they're gorgeous. And Jen is just tickled pink. Jen has them very prominently displayed so we can see them all the time. Thank you so much, Chental. I mean, I know Jen, I'm sure she thanked you at the show, and she'll probably thank you again a little bit later when we get on because there were several gifts that were given. But anyway, Chental asks, hope I'm saying your name right, Chental. Let's see, when you do a run-through, you usually play a very different style for Jen. Do you actually use her playing style, or is it just coincidental? By the way, it's hilarious when you're scolding the imaginary Jen player for not making smart moves, because, of course, I'm scolding myself. That's a good question. I wouldn't say that well, actually, There's no hard and fast rule about how I do it. The number one thing I'm trying to do as I'm playing as two characters is I'm always, wherever possible, just trying to show two different overall strategies. Because with my run-throughs, that's what I focus on more than anything else, trying to give as broad a perspective of what the game offers. So the worst thing I can ever do is, and sometimes this happens in run-throughs, sometimes a game will have a situation where, okay, it's the first turn, and I guess I'll do this, and then Jen does the same thing. And quite frankly, a game where there is just like, hey, when we start out, we should all be doing the exact same thing, that's likely a game that Jen and I aren't going to like because it means there aren't enough interesting, varied paths to victory. So, since Jen and I tend to like games that really encourage divergent strategies, when I start playing, I just try to pick two. And honestly, the strategies I take are really just based on what pops up on the cards or the tiles or the dice or whatever it might be, knowing that, okay, well, this is what I did on the first turn, and I've immediately made an overall strategy of what I'm going to have myself, me as a player, try to show. What can I do with Jen's character that is radically different, that is trying to show a very different side of the game? And now, to Chantal's question, as often as not, that can often lead to I'm playing as my, the moves I make for me are the types of moves I personally would make. And the moves I play for Jen are the types of moves Jen would tend to make because Jen and I tend to be very different players. Jen is very long-term planning, put away a little bit now so you have a really big move later, whereas I am much more opportune. I am definitely a bird in the hand. Forget about those two over in the bush. I'll be dead before I ever get over there. And Jen is always thinking about all those birds in the bush. And so I guess it does kind of tend to go that way because my immediate gut reaction when I sit down to do a run-through is to make a move I would make. And then it's just kind of natural that I would make a move for Jen that's kind of what she would like to make. But it doesn't always work out that way because, sometimes that first move, the dice or whatever, might push me into a long-term strategy and might push Jen into a long-term strategy. So there's no real, again, hard and fast rule. It really is just a reflection of how the game tends to evolve. And like I said, my number one rule is not really to recreate Jen at the table, but just to show variation and variability of the games. So what else do we have? Let's see. Darcy asks, do you pay attention to whether players are able to play as male or female characters? And if so, can you recommend games that are good at that? Ideally, more than just a picture on a player board, an actual character that impacts gameplay. I can only think of games that make you play one gender, like Last Will, where companions are girlfriends, school chems are male, and you can hire a valet but not a lady's maid, etc. Or very occasionally something like Marrying Mr. Darcy that goes the opposite way. Thank you for considering my question, Darcy. It's a great question, Darcy. I will be honest. The interesting thing is, and again, I'm just looking at my wall of 300 plus games, the vast majority of games that Jen and I play, it seems like the overwhelming theme of games that we are drawn to is what are often referred to disparagingly as JASEs, Just Another Soulless Euro. Jen and I, we love Just Another Soulless Euros. Our favorite role to play in a game, it seems like, at least if you count the overall games that are on this wall, are no-name, anonymous middle managers of history, whether it's in the Renaissance or ancient Rome or, the Old West or, whatever it might be, or ancient caveman times. We tend to be drawn to games where we are in a position that we have responsibility for directing a variety of characters. Of course, that's the standard for worker placement and whatnot, but we have a lot of, worker placement isn't even my favorite gameplay. So the majority of games I'm looking at right now are really kind of gender neutral because, who are you in Race for the Galaxy? You are just some leader of an intergalactic civilization. You could be male, you could be female. It doesn't matter. Or third, because of course you could be an alien and who knows what, sexual orientation you might have under those circumstances or what, the way gender might go for an alien. It really isn't something that comes up in most of our games. Now that said, Jen and I both definitely appreciate games that stay away from cheesecake. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Neither Jen nor I are really going to decry the prevalence of cheesecake, that has a rich and storied history, particularly in the fantasy and, science fiction genres. George Lucas could have given Princess Leia a bra in Star Wars. He didn't. We don't even really go into why, but that was his choice, and and we live with it. It's okay. But something like Legends of Andor that puts the female, that lets you play as a male or female for every single role, whether you are the elvish archer or the dwarven fighter or the human, whatever, you can be male or female, and all the female versions are just as smartly and correctly dressed as their male counterparts. Of course, we got to give props because it is silly to have the ladies running around in chainmail bikinis. Although it's interesting, this actually came up recently in Sword and Sorcery, a run-through I did, and Jen really didn't mind the heaving bodices. When it boiled right down to it, the only thing she really minded was the female characters running around in high heels. That's the thing that drives her nuts. Heck, for years, she would scream every Friday night at the TV at Agent Scully, "Why are you running around in that warehouse in heels? Mulder doesn't have to wear heels. Scully, what are you doing?" Or more to the point, Chris Carter, kill the heels, hashtag. So it's something that really doesn't come up because we just don't tend towards gender-specific games. We appreciate it when it comes up, and quite frankly, I think this is another example of, you could go to guild.rahdo.com, start a thread on this, and you would get an explosion of responses with really great suggestions. And and there are lots of really great suggestions, but I'll leave it for guild.rahdo.com. But that's kind of how Jen and I look at it. So what else do we have here? Okay, Ross asks, my question is about your view on board game storage. I have had people tell me that storing games vertical is the best, or horizontal is better. Where as I really just try to find room for my stuff however it fits. Is there any substance to these people's arguments? No, there's not. I'm always surprised that people take a strong stand on this issue because it's absolutely zero issue. Stack them however you want. It doesn't really matter. I know some people say that, but if you put them vertically, then all the components will get messed up. That's why everybody, all board game geeks, worth their salt, have about 1 million plastic baggies. I've got an entire cupboard full of them for any game where, after I've punched it and after we played it, I put all the stuff in baggies. And then it doesn't matter how I store it on the wall. Everything is fine. It's easy to set up and play in the future. So, I tend to like storing them vertically, mostly because of aesthetics. I'm looking at them again right now, and I think it looks better. It feels more like I've got a bookshelf. Because, you don't put books horizontally, you put them vertically, and I like to feel better. It just works for me. It makes me feel a little bit more cultured and refined. That said, what I really like is variability. That's why we ultimately chose Billy Bookcase from IKEA, the Billy Bookcases over the Expedits, because the Expedit and whatever the new replacement for the Expedit bookshelf is, everything is very uniform. All the shelves are exactly the same size. You just get this grid and you put your games inside. We really liked Billy in large part because we had adjustable shelves. And so I love having, just lots of asymmetry, big shelves, big games, little games all over the place. And in fact, I've noticed I tend to even mix it up. I would say probably 70% of all my games are stored vertically, but then I've got about 30 that are horizontally, and I'm just throwing them in there because it looks nice. So variety is the spice of life. Do both. Swing both ways, Ross. That's what I say. Do whatever you think looks best because it just doesn't matter. They're just things. If anything, that's probably my number one. I know we can be very, very precious about our board games and take really good care of them and sleeve all the cards and all that. But really, at the end of the day, they're just stuff. They're just physical objects. It just doesn't matter. They're not what's most important in life. Heck, playing Pandemic Legacy has helped remind me of that. Recently, I noticed I opened a couple of boxes, and we're in a very high humid area here in Malta. There was some mold in some of the boxes. And at first I'm like, oh my gosh, what do I have to do? I have to open all the boxes and scrub them all out and put in desiccant, baggies and all that. And I'm like, but why? It's just cardboard. It's just stuff. It just doesn't matter. So I guess that's where I come down on the storage thing and, the broader implications of that question. Let's see. And then looks like one more question from Chris. Chris asks, all right. Chris actually wrote a very, very long message, which was very personal, and he told me all kinds of stuff about his own life situation, and I'm not going to read any of that, but I will read his question, and then I will look over to Jen and ask if it is okay to answer, because Jen really likes to play her cards close to her chest and isn't generally very happy with me just being very laissez-faire and telling everybody everything about us. But honey, the question Chris asks, Jen's just she's kind of semi-napping. I don't know how she can be napping at all. I'm making so much noise here. Chris asks, is there a reason you guys don't have children, and do you regret it? You can absolutely answer. Jen is fine with me answering. He has another question later. So Jen, here's the first question. Is there a reason we don't have kids? Do we regret it? And answer, there's no medical reason. We are both, actually, that's not true. That's not true. There is a medical reason. I guess, strictly speaking, the main reason we don't have children is because I got a vasectomy at age 22. Or maybe it was 23. I don't really remember. It's a whole nother story there. I'd gotten fired from Nintendo. We only had like 15 days left on our amazing insurance that covered everything that I had from Nintendo. And Jen were like, well, crap, we only have 15 days left. What do we do? And like, well, it's now or never because it covered vasectomies. And so I got my vasectomy much younger, although I was very happy to do it. But anyway, so if that tells you anything, it's like I've always known I had no interest in kids. Since I was a little kid, I knew I did not want to have kids of my own. And, it's just always been a part of me. I guess on some deep-seated level, it's selfishness. I know I have always understood implicitly and intuitively how much of your own life you have to give up and how much your life becomes your kid's life. And my whole life, I have never seen any I've never had any interest or desire or attraction towards that. And quite frankly, one of the main reasons I was able to retire, in my mid-40s is because of that choice I made when I was 5 years old to never, ever have kids. It's the reason Jen and I, we've been able to live all over the world. It's the reason we have been able to retire. It's given us so much. And while I am sure folks who have kids would be quick to point out all that we have lost, all that we have not gotten a chance to experience, I don't know. I've known a lot of people with kids. I've been around kids a lot all my life, and I'm just not seeing it. It's never really been something of interest to me. I fundamentally, I honestly, I suspect I would be a great dad. I could certainly see myself doing it. I think I could be very supportive and very nurturing, and really help kids, find their inner selves and all that, and become, the best person they could be. And I could see how there would be some satisfaction to that, but oh man, so much work. And I am the laziest SOB you are ever going to meet. So I just didn't want to make work for myself, and I've known that my whole life. Now, Jen is interesting because she came to it from a different perspective. Jen she'd already had, by the time she was 5 or 6, when I had decided, no kids ever. No matter what happens, I'm not having kids. Jen, by the time she was 5 or 6, she had already figured it all out. First, she was going to have a boy, and he was going to be Alex. And then 2 or 3 years later, she was going to have a girl, and she was going to be named, not Alexandria, Amethyst, Amy. She was going to be named Amethyst, and it was important to have the older brother and the younger sister. And Jen had worked this out from the earliest days, and that was something she was still carrying around when we were dating in college, and that was something she was carrying around even after we got married. And I think to a certain extent, it was just something that had been she was culturally predisposed to do. She had just been programmed. Because, oh my gosh, there was a question earlier about, gender issues. Don't even get me started on societal gender programming. Every time a thread comes up about why aren't there more women in games, and it's because, men aren't inclusive. It has nothing to do with that. There are not more women in games because in our modern society, little girls are given easy bake ovens, little boys are given Battleship. It's just ingrained in us. And it's wrong. There's no reason for it at all. It's just a societal, cultural thing that hopefully within the next, 3 or 4 or 5 generations as a species, we will grow out of it. But it is very, very hard for people to let go of those things. So, if you are an aunt or an uncle, please don't just give the typical, let's give Barbie dolls or G.I. Joe figures. And by the same token, don't go out of your way to, I think it's very laudable, all those, I've seen like Kickstarters for engineering kits for girls, that try to get girls interested in engineering at an early age. I'm like, erector sets would be just as good. Little boys and little girls, they are sponges. They are ready to learn anything. They are eager to please. Give little girls erector sets. Give little girls Legos. You don't have to give little girl-themed engineering sets. Just don't give, I'm sorry, that's totally as an aside. Why did right, because I think to a certain extent, Jen had actually kind of fallen into that gender stereotyping where girls, are trained from a very, very early age to play games that are all about having families and getting married and nurturing. And so Jen just bought into that. And she grew up just taking it for granted. Wow, this is a political firestorm. Jen did not know this was going to happen, but I asked, and she said, yeah, go ahead and answer. So anyway, so she grew up that way. And even when we were married, and I told her, when we were talking about getting married, she says, no, you didn't. And I'm like, yes, I did. I made it very clear. There is no way, honey. You have to know this going in. Because actually, when we were in our early 20s, Jen was the one really pushing for marriage. I was a little bit nervous about it. And so Jen was and Jen's like, oh my God, why did I give him free rein to even answer this question? Because she could get in the Wayback Machine to take it back. But anyway, I remember very clearly warning her, honey, I'm not going to have kids. And that time she was still thinking about it. But anyway, so we got married, and then I think she was very, very surprised when this whole insurance thing came up because I got fired from Nintendo, which, like I said, was a whole nother story, but that's for another day. And I decided, I should get a vasectomy now. And she's like, huh? And I think, the shoe dropped, and, she did a 180, and, she did a spit take and all of that. And that really kind of forced her to start evaluating her own life life choices, because by that point we were married. And whether she appreciated it or not, I think I had told her, and in the back of her head she always thought, oh, he'll come around, it's fine. And then when I started making noise about, hey, in the next 2 weeks I got to get a vasectomy, and I'm 23, that probably scared her a little bit. Now I think, and she's looking right at me, she can chime in anytime she wants, I believe when I got the vasectomy, in the back of her head she's like, it's reversible. It's okay. She nods yes. That's why she let it happen. But the fact that I made, and it's weird, the doctor, he kept warning, don't do it. I would never do it for somebody your age because it's not reversible. Strictly speaking, they are reversible, I think, the majority of the time, and Jen knew that. Although we couldn't be sure because we couldn't look it up on the internet because there was no internet back then. This was so long ago. But she was fairly confident we could reverse it. And, heck, by the time we were in our mid-30s, we would have decided, we need something more in our lives, and kids are going to be how we fill our golden years, and they're going to give us our sense of purpose and stuff like that. So he'll come around, don't worry. And, hey, in the meantime, it just, makes certain things about life easier. And of course, I was thinking about it very differently, and I think me making that choice and going through it, and oh my gosh, there's a whole other story about getting a vasectomy, but I don't know if that's ready for prime time. We'll talk about that maybe another day if anybody would like to know. Ask me in real life. That's probably not something I should put into podcast. There's swelling is involved. But anyway, me making that choice, I think, really made her start thinking. And it took several years. And in fact, it's been a growing process for Jen for the last 20 years. We've been married for over 20 years now. But nowadays, in our mid-40s, Jen is probably the most militantly anti-kid, not anti-children, but anti-having kids person I've ever known. She is much more anti-having kids than I have ever been, and I've been 100% certain. I mean, we have some neighbors, I'm going to lower my voice just a little bit, who are lovely, a wonderful young couple, greatest people. One's Maltese, one's American. We absolutely adore them to bits. They've got, 3 kids? 2 kids? And, oh my God, these little rugrats. They seem like sweet little kids, but the noise just never ends. They're much louder than our chickens, much louder than our beagles ever are. And every time, we hear them wailing, Jen says, have I mentioned today how happy I am not to have kids? That is like Jen's mantra in life. So, honestly, she would have to describe if there was any really inciting incident. I really do think it was that early age vasectomy that made her start reevaluating her priorities and deprogramming herself. Because that's the thing. I think as a society, certainly in Western culture, we are programmed from early age to grow up, and you are just going to hit certain milestones in your life. You're gonna have kids. You're going to have your 2.5 kids. You're going to have a house in the suburbs. You're going to get married. You're going to do all these things. And if you don't follow that prescribed plan... Oh dear, sorry about those technical difficulties, folks. I ran out of power on my camera battery. Oopsie doops, that snuck up on me, and I have no idea where I was. I was in the middle of my crazy rant. Let's see, what was I just saying? I think I was just talking about, societal programming. There was a time in our evolution as a species where, ticking all the boxes of what you're supposed to do was very important. Because, heck, most of your kids didn't make it. They died in childbirth or they died young. And so you had to, create that strong family unit, and you had to grow. And, and it was something that pushed us forward as a species, and that's great. But in our modern world, we don't have to hold on to those preset notions anymore. You do not have to be defined by your job. You do not have to be defined as a person by your kids. You do not have to have kids to fulfill your life and have meaning. And honestly, gosh, that's just the tip of the iceberg. Don't get me started on basic income. But that's like a whole nother topic. But long story short, I'm sorry, did that answer the question? Yeah, it was a choice. And do we regret it? Chris, no, we do not regret it. Neither Jen nor I regret it. Even when we see, every once in a while, Jen will see a really well-behaved child, little boy, little girl, and will say out loud, well, okay, now that one's okay. I can make do with that. But even still, very, very happy not to have it. Jen, she is all about the beagles, all about the chickens, and all about me. And me, I'm just all about her. We fulfill each other, and we fulfill ourselves. We don't have to stick to the script. And so, Chris, who was asking this because of medical reasons, he and his wife can't have kids, and he knew we didn't. And so, Chris, all I can say is, believe me, buddy, let go of that societal programming. Your life doesn't have to be defined by whether you've passed on your genes or not. We can let go of that. There are plenty of other people in the world doing it. Find something else that gives you purpose and meaning, and you can be happy. So, also, Chris had one more question, which is, right, so one more question if you don't mind. How have you guys done it? And then, again, he taught some more personal stuff about, he's been married for 10 years, and sometimes they have a hard time keeping their marriage going, and, he sees in the videos that Jen and I, we love each other, and we are a good team, and what's our secret? And of course, this has absolutely nothing to do with board games, or at best, it's tangential. Actually, board games do kind of come into it, so I can try to keep this all on topic. But honestly, I'm not going to speak for Jen. For me, the key to a successful marriage is two things, and heck, I talked about this earlier in the podcast when I was talking about Fog of Love: communication and compromise. You have to be willing to do the two C's. I could write a book. I could call it the two C's, how to have the perfect marriage: communication and compromise. And honestly, both those are very, very, very hard things to do. And that's why having a successful marriage is very hard. It is very, very hard to wear your heart on your sleeve and really put out there how you feel and let go of any kind of issues of, well, am I worthy, or, but you have to be open and honest. You have to be able to say what you're thinking. And, Jen and I, we've been married a long time, and we've often had very, very difficult conversations. It will go on for hours where we talk about, get to and root out the deep underlying issues of whatever issue we might be facing to get to the real bottom of it. And, you got to do it. It's maintenance. We got to do one of these every 6 months or so, just to make sure, we're keeping everything on even keel. We're keeping everything open and honest and communicative, and there's nothing festering. There's nothing building up under the surface, because that's what tears a marriage apart. You can't let that happen. And then step two, the compromise. And, believe me, this is something both Jen and I have to do, and neither of us are perfect at it, but we keep trying. There are lots of things about me that drive Jen nuts. There are a few things about Jen that drive me nuts. We are both very, very aware through communication of what drives each other nuts. And, even if it's a dumb little thing, we have to feel comfortable and safe to be able to describe this and say why it bothers us and articulate why, so that the other person can, okay, well, let me see myself through your eyes. Oh, okay, I can see from your perspective that would be annoying. All right, I'm going to try and do something about that. I can't promise anything, but tell you what, here's what I think I can do. And, so Jen and I, we make deals, we make compromises, and that's what's taken, and that's what's gotten us to where we are. And, and that's why we're a good team. That's why we love each other, and that's our secret sauce. So that was it, folks. Right, and board games. Another thing, let's see, I need a C. Communication, compromise, and what's a C word for cooperation? No, because it's not just co-op games. But the thing is, one thing Jen and I, consensus? Consideration? Maybe. What I'm going for is, another thing Jen and I have always done is we've always looked for activities we can do together. And now, of course, there's one very easy box or way to tick that box of something you can share, and that would be kids. And I think that's what holds a lot of I know that's what held my mom and dad's marriage together. They stuck it out, even though they were not necessarily the best fit, until my brother Ryan and I were out of the house, and then boom, divorced. But props to them. Good on them. They did the right thing. They were not selfish. They sucked it up, and they did the best thing for me and Ryan. And so I have nothing but the utmost respect for my parents. And parents who decide, this isn't working out, let's forget about what happens to the kids. We're going to split up. Find a way, folks. You had those kids. Find a way to make it work for 20 years, and then you can split up. That's what my folks did. I think it was very, very important to my formative rearing. But anyway, so kids is something that you can obviously share, and it can give both your lives meaning. Jen and I, we've never had kids, so we always look for other things. For the longest time, I remember in Seattle, we went bike riding all over the place. We haven't ridden bikes for years, but man, we were avid cyclists. And then for a long time, we were geocachers. And we have geocached all over the world. We haven't done that for a long time. For the majority of my adult life, I have always been trying to find video games that we could play together. Great co-op games like Cookie and Cream or... I mean, there's so many of them now, but Cookie and Cream is always the one that comes to mind. But we were always looking for cooperative games we could play together. But just, what is it now, 2009, 2010, just 5 or 6 years ago, we discovered Modern Designer board games. And my God, what a great couples activity. Okay, there they are. It's cheesy, but communication, compromise, and couple activities. That's what you need. And for us, that third, you have to have something you can share. And if it's not going to be kids, it has to be something else. And oh my God, board games are so great. I feel so bad. I mean, I get a lot of questions from folks saying, I love board games. I've got a great board game group. My spouse just doesn't get into them. Do you have any suggestions? Man, that comes back to the communication and the compromise. Spouses out there who just don't really understand why your significant other is into board games, compromise. Find a way. Share that with them because you'll make your relationship so much better. And, it's interesting. I mean, so many, I'm getting back to my other rant, particularly it's just such a preconceived notion that women just are not into gaming. Just period. And why is that? It's because men stink and because there's too many stereotypical sexist images of women and all that. I don't believe that's what it is. I believe it's that most women are programmed from a very, very early age that their life needs to be focused less on competition, less on gaming and gamesmanship and the theory of gaming, and more on nurturing, because they're going to raise the kids. They're going to be the thing that holds the family together. And right from the get-go, when they get those first toys, and those toys are things that let them role play being a mom, it's just natural. It's so ingrained in our society. That's why more women don't play games, because from a very early age, they've been trained not to, because they have more important things to worry about. Whereas boys, they are trained to play games because games will give them the edge when they go out into the workspace and, they have to be competitive and whatnot. And now, of course, this is, I'm making a blanket statement, which of course is not true. Everybody grows up in different circumstances, but I personally strongly believe that this is a societal programming thing that we are slowly getting rid of. And the more social justice warriors out there that can really try to change people's perceptions of gender roles in society, the better as far as I'm concerned, because give it 3 or 4 generations and we'll finally break that, and you'll have just as many women playing board games as men, but it's going to take a while to get there. And anyway, so I'm sorry, I don't know, honey, if you want to add to this. Right, so Jen, honey, hi, honey pie. Do you have anything to say on Chris's question?
Yes, I do. And I think you just hit it on the head in that women have more important things to do.
Okay.
That is, I think, the crux of it. Women have been taught from a very young age that taking care of everything else before their pleasures is far more important. And so sitting down to play a game, which is an enjoyment, is certainly not going to be high on the list of priorities. So my thought is that if you want to bring your spouse or your girlfriend into it, you need to figure out some way that, it's of interest to her. It's a game that she's going to be rewarded for playing, not one that you're rewarded for playing. Okay, not the one that you're the best at, but something that she would enjoy. And also, gussy it up however you have to as a date night, as, dinner and a game or whatever, get babysitters for the kids or whatever, so that she is really free to enjoy this as a recreational opportunity rather than something she has to shoehorn in around everything else she's got going on.
Because she's just trying to do this. Right, my husband wants to do this. All right, well, I'll try to make the time. There's another thing that goes on my list of things to do in my hectic schedule of raising kids and keeping the household straight and working a full-time job and making the dinner, bringing home the bacon and frying it up in a pan and never letting you forget you're a man, because, of course, that's what I've been trained to do my whole life.
Yep.
That's actually a very good point. So, it's interesting. I mean, our gateway game was Pandemic. And I was the one who went out and found that, and I chose that one.
Yes, but what did we do when we were at a point
Yeah.
where I didn't have anything I had to do. We
Right.
were on a camper van holiday. There was nothing to do in the evenings. I didn't even have to cook. There was nothing to clean. There was nothing that needed doing. So I was able to totally give myself over to
This experience, this new experience.
how, thinking about it during the day, how we were going to try and beat it that night. So I essentially was put in this situation where I didn't have any other responsibilities. So I can't imagine most people could go off on a 2-week holiday to inculcate the lady of the land inn. But
That's interesting. I mean, I was going to say the reason I mentioned pandemic is because I chose it because it was a cooperative game, and before pandemic, I didn't even know cooperative board games exist. I also chose it because I know, for whatever weird reason, Jen has almost a fetish for viral post-apocalypse stories. She absolutely loves that as a genre, and so I chose it because I hoped she would really like it. Now, to be fair, though, I mean, you're a very good point. I mean, you did have a rare window where you weren't having to worry about your business. You weren't having to worry about running the household. I mean, Jen runs all our finances. I mean, Jen has 2 full-time jobs, her glass business and running our lives, to be fair. And so you were able to put that on hold. But you, and I'm kind of curious, this is way off topic. Chris, this is what happens when people don't ask me more board game questions.
this is one of our communications.
Yes, this is. So I'm curious why you've been playing games with me for years, and were you not trained as a young girl that gaming is not important? There's more important things to be doing in life. Were you trained that way? You were certainly trained to have kids. Like I said, you had decided. Alex and Amy. I remember this. You told me this when we were dating, and in the back of my head was like, oh. Well, this isn't going to go anywhere then, because I'm planning on having a vasectomy by the time I'm 23. Bucket list item achieved. So why would you say you? Yes, it was certainly an ideal time to introduce you to gaming, but I think I could have introduced you to it at any time, and you still would have gotten into it. It just helped that we were on that holiday, that road trip. But we used to play a lot of Street Fighter.
Yep.
I remember you were always Blanca, I was always Chun-Li. Yep. Once again, upsetting gender stereotypes while we were at it.
Well, and we played Magic.
We played a lot of Magic the Gathering. I played a lot. I mean, heck, Magic the Gathering helped us buy our house in Oregon. I mean, which is a whole nother thing too. So yeah, we played a lot of EverQuest, and I got out of it, and you stayed in it. So you're a gamer girl.
Yeah.
And so I'm kind of curious. You don't have the same barriers that I think a lot of women have in modern society of, games, I don't have time for games. I've got too many other things. I mean, games are a trivial thing, and I need to be focusing on other stuff. Why have you always, as long as I've known, quote, had time for games?
Well, I can remember being in 5th grade and scrounging up the change from under the couch and going down and playing Pac-Man. Or Donkey Kong at the 7-Eleven. So I've always made time for games. So perhaps there's a bit of that. But there's also certainly a struggle with time management and making sure that I've got the important things done before I sit down to play a game. And that's even still something.
That's true. That's very, very true. I mean, that's a huge, huge difference between me and Jen. Getting back to that whole bird in the hand versus 2 in the bush. I live my whole life like as soon as I walk out that front door, I'm going to get hit by a bus. So if there's something fun that we could be doing right now, let's do it. Let's not wait until chores are done. Chores... I'm not going to regret lying on my deathbed after I get hit by that bus and I've got seconds left to live, or my death street. I'm not going to regret, I didn't get the chores done. But I might regret not having watched that final episode of Lost, or whatever it might be. So for me, I always put fun first and chores second. And Jen, now that's something that's so deep-seated, ingrained in you, that you will, we'll play the game tonight. And I'm like, okay, we're not going to play it because I know whatever your chore is that you're doing, whether it's your job or whatever, that's going to go long. And you always put work ahead of fun. I have my whole life put fun ahead of work. Yeah. Why would you say that is? And why can you not let that go?
That's got to be conditioning more than societal, just familial conditioning, the kind of person I am. It's just, I've always been that way.
Nature, nurture question, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yep, that's true. I imagine your sister's pretty much the same way. But anyway, folks, sorry, that was a very long-winded answer to Chris's question. Do we have children? Do we regret it? What's the secret to our marriage? Perhaps next time you folks will actually send some board game related questions to questions@rahdo.com. But we're done with Q&A. Now, hold please. I'm going to have to go switch batteries again. I don't want to go dry again. I'll be back in a moment. Okay, everybody, are you still reeling from that last section? It's actually funny, after we were done, Jen and I kept on talking about what made her the way she is, and we did come to a conclusion. It was her mother. Her mother, who was a single, independent woman who has always been the sassiest lady I know, and who trained both of her daughters to go against the grain of society. So, Emily, not that you're listening to this right now, but good job. You raised a good one. But anyway, so next topic, Essen. How was Essen? Of course, I've already talked a bit about the games I played there, but I imagine some people would be curious to hear a post-show report. And honestly, I don't really have that much to say because Essen is an odd duck for me. I'm sure everybody's heard Essen is, unlike most conventions where you go to play games, at Essen, Spieltage, Essen Game Days, Essen Spieltage, you go there not to play games, but to buy games. And, that is a reflection of the German culture where board games are very much an everyday, normal day of life thing for people. I mean, heck, in the Sunday newspaper, right next to reviews of all the movies and all the books, you can see reviews of all the games that have come out. It's just a much more broadly accepted thing. It's absolutely an awesome part of German culture. And so, Essen is a trade fair to go and buy, not to play, unlike in America, which again has a very, very different culture when it comes to gaming. So, I played a few games there, but for the most part, at Essen, I spend 4 days nonstop running. Rahdo literally runs through Essen. And in fact, if you were at Essen, if you were watching, at any given point, there's a very good chance you would have seen me literally running from one place to another. In fact, I know all the shortcuts. I know all the ways to get away from the crowds and get from Hall 1 to Hall 3 lickety-split or to get to Hall 7 and all that, because I always just have a ton of appointments for people I'm supposed to go to meet, to pick up review copies of games, to sit down and have game demo sessions and all that. So, I don't really have much to say about Essen. I very much enjoyed the run-through I did for the Essen press room. It's like one of the few slowing down, quiet moments I got where I got to just walk around and look at a bunch of games for 45 minutes, and I filmed myself doing it. You can see that on the channel at rahdo.com if you haven't seen it yet. But, I certainly can say I had an amazing haul, something like 80 games we brought back home. And I guess that's an interesting topic. How, I'm sure I know a lot of people have asked, how do you bring back 80 games? How do you do that? Well, probably about 2/3 of it we did have to ship. And the first rule of thumb when you're shipping games home from Essen, put them in fewer, bigger boxes. Because I forget what the top limit is. I think it's 20 kilos or 25 kilos. 30 kilos is what DHL will allow. We found this out the hard way because I had to pack and repack the boxes a couple of times. But there's some upper limit. And if you can pack near to that limit, and so you only ship like 2 gigantic boxes as opposed to 4 medium-sized boxes or 6 medium-sized boxes, you will save a ton of money. That's hugely important. But the other trick we do that I've learned in recent years is I don't take luggage. We do not take luggage to Essen, because the problem with trying to stuff all your games into like some big gigantic checked luggage bag for the flight back is, well, one, luggage is heavy. And of course you get your limit of whatever it is, 50 pounds, 20 kilos, I think. 44 pounds or 20 kilos for your checked bags. And if you're already having 5 of those pounds going to just your luggage, that's like 2 games you're not bringing back. So what we do is, we take big double-walled cardboard boxes, line them with bubble wrap inside, which weighs almost nothing, and we stuff them to the brim with games. And doing that, we can check twice the number of games into the storage of the plane cargo hold than you would be if you were just trying to put them into your regular luggage. So even though we have some very nice luggage, I never travel with anymore. I just travel with old, beat-up, nondescript cardboard boxes that are huge. They're gigantic, just as long as I keep them under the weight restriction. And what I do is we have a very nice little trolley or dolly, whatever a little dolly that shrinks down to nothing. And, it expands, and I can instantly use that to wheel around this big unwieldy box that I carry with me everywhere. So it's just as easy as a normal piece of luggage to carry around. But then once I check the box, I just take and put my little carry-on bag on the dolly, and no one at security has ever stopped me. Even though, because it just looks like, oh, it's all part of my luggage, and nobody gives a second thought. So that is a little pro trip that I use to be able to bring more games back with me that you guys could use if you like. And let's see, what else? Oh, the math trade was crazy this year. I did a run-through. I did a video showing you what the math trade was like 2 years ago. This year, it was so populated. There were so many people that the organizers of the show had to actually send guards, aides, whatever, volunteers to direct traffic, because we took up the entire, the Galleria Hall. We took up half of the Galleria. It was a zoo. It was crazy. And I'd never seen it, that full before. And what was interesting is I was talking to Scott Aldi of Board Game Geek, the head honcho of Board Game Geek, and he said at one point the organizers came to him and said, hey, this math trade thing, you guys need to get that under control. As if Board Game Geek had anything to do with it, because they were so desperate to try to get us under control. But eventually, and of course Board Game Geek had nothing to do with it, Aldi, there was nothing he could do. But the nice thing is, there was a solution. I noticed for the second and third day when I walked by, they had actually opened the big gigantic bay doors, and the daily math trade meet had spilled out into the parking lot. And so it was just absolutely, it was a sea of people all holding up dozens and dozens of signs trying to find the person. Actually, I know for a lot of people it's a pain in the butt. I think it's a lot of fun, just kind of being in this big roiling sea of people, just looking for that needle in a haystack to get that one person that you have to get that game to. I think it's fun, but I'm sure for a lot of people it's really annoying. But it was crazy this year. But, that's really all I've got to say about Essen. I picked up a lot of games. I got to see a few games, and I pretty much ran nonstop, and I bumped a lot of fists. Because I have to say a huge thank you to Eric Martin of Board Game Geek for pointing out to me the wisdom of don't shake hands at a convention. Particularly if you're somebody like me and you're going to have a couple of hundred people want to shake your hand. If you ever try to shake my hand at a convention, you will find me sticking my fist in your general direction, waiting for a fist bump. Because that's how you stop con crud from spreading. I can only hope that, again, within 2 or 3 generations, shaking hands will have gone the way of the dodo, because we don't need to check each other for weapons anymore. Fist bump instead. That is a way to ensure, whatever. If you shake my hand at a show, you have shaken 200 other people's hands, and you're going to get sick. Guaranteed. But if you bump fists, you're not going to. So I strongly recommend bump fists. That's all I got to say about Essen. But it's interesting. Jen is sitting here now, and I think she has a little bit to say, because I mentioned earlier in the show, Jen, thanks to Ludi Creations, again, huge thanks, huge props to Ludi Creations for giving Jen this space, had a fantastic show. Jen is now clearing out her phlegm. Are you ready, honey pie? I'm going to hand the mic over to her while I go get some water.
So we did get calm crud, unfortunately, because...
And why would that be?
Because I was shaking hands.
How many hands did you shake, honey?
Loads and loads.
And hey, what did you bring back?
Well, it might have been you.
No.
Anyway, so next year it's fist bumps all around, and just makes sense, doesn't it? I had a really, really, really amazing show. I was, how you kind of get the first day of school jitters, and you think you're going to be sitting off in your little corner all by yourself, and nobody's going to come say hi to you. And actually, that was not the case at all for me, and I just was so pleased and so surprised, and it was just wonderful. I met so many great people, both for Rahdo things and for glass things, and it was really fun. I gave out a bunch of Rahdo runs through stickers, and to see people do the rah rah Rahdo dance and song that goes with that, some of them made up.
That is not a thing. Rah rah Rahdo is not a thing.
It's gonna be a thing. It's definitely going to be a thing.
All right.
I loved it. Anyway, just had a really good time. And Ludi Creations, again, so very kind of them to let me have space in their booth. It was just incredible. And actually, my spot was awesome. So, and so nice to meet everybody. So I didn't actually get out to see much in the convention. I did get a couple of afternoon breaks as the days went on, and would try and meet up with my husband and grab something to eat, but even that didn't work successfully all the time. But there's just so many people there and so much noise and color and stuff going on. It's definitely it's a bit overwhelming, but really fun. So I guess, is there anything else I need to say?
Nope.
Okay.
All right. Don't worry, Jen will be back in a little bit to talk about the top 10 because that is she is contractually required. But I thought of one more thing to say. Our trip to Essen was definitely left a little bit desired. It was an adventure. So we have to get up. To get to Essen, we have to take a ferry to the mainland in Malta. Then we have to drive across the entire country to get to Malta to get to the airport. Then we have to fly to Dusseldorf. We have a direct flight there. We were going to get picked up at the airport. It was going to be great. So we get up at 3:30 in the morning to catch the 4:30 ferry, or 5 o'clock ferry. We get to the 5 o'clock ferry, and if we'd caught it, we would have made it to the airport on time. Everything would have been great. But we get to the ferry a half an hour early. And it turns out
at 4:30 in the morning.
4:30 in the morning, there is no sunlight. And it turns out that this particular morning, there was an unusually large number of lorries, really big trucks that had to get from Gozo to Malta. There were so many, in fact, that they had to spread them across both sides of the ferry or else the ferry would capsize. And because trucks were on both sides of the ferry, they could not allow the second level of parking on the ferry to be available. And because of that, even though we were there a half an hour early, the ferry left without us and a whole bunch of other people. And so we had to wait for an hour, and then we had waiting for an hour and then catching the next ferry put us in Malta right at the height of early morning rush hour traffic that completely gridlocks this entire country. Because, little known fact about the country of Malta, there are more cars than people. That is a gosh darn honest to goodness fact. That includes newborn babies. There are more cars than people in this country. The Maltese have a unnatural love affair with cars. It's almost like an American style thing that families have to have 3 or 4 cars apiece, even though there's nowhere to drive. It's like one of the tiniest countries in the world. It's absolutely insane. So we got stuck in absolutely just god-awful bumper-to-bumper traffic. We missed our plane by about 10 minutes. And so then we're trying to figure out what to do. And they say, well, you could come back tomorrow afternoon and get another direct flight. And we're like, well, but if we do that, Jen's going to miss the entire first day of the show. So what can you do for us? How can we fly today? And they say, well, you could fly into Amsterdam or you could fly into Berlin. And so there were these options of, other countries we could fly to. But then we would just be stuck there for 4 hours waiting for a transfer. And of course, but then we ask, or we start thinking, well, you know what? Okay, so we could fly into one of these other cities, and then we could get the train. You travel all over the place in Europe by train, right? So I just do a quick search online with my iPhone, and I see, okay, if we fly into Munich, and there was a flight leaving in a half an hour, so we could get on the flight right away, and then once we get into Munich, within an hour we'd be on a train, and the little Google search I did said, yeah, that train's going to be, I think it was going to be 30 euros a piece. So it would cost us 60 euros. It wouldn't be that bad. So you say, sold, let's do it. We have to end up paying another 200 euros for the plane fare, but whatever. We know we'll have a cool train ride from you. That'll be really awesome, making lemonade out of lemons. So that's great. We fly, the uneventful flight. We get to Munich. We go over and then we find out, oh, no, it's not 30 euros a ticket. It's more like 200 euros a ticket. So it would have been almost 400 euros for us to take the train. What went wrong? When I did the search on cheaptickets.com or something like that, in my panic, I didn't notice that they were actually trying to book me tickets 2 months in advance. And if you try to book on the day, it's ridiculously expensive. So now we're stuck in Munich on the other side of Germany. Can't possibly justify paying that much. And so we have the bright idea, okay, we'll rent a car. We're Americans. We're used to driving a long ways. So we get a car and we spend the rest of the day. It ended up being, even though it was only supposed to be a 6-hour drive, there were some really, the Autobahn is not all it's cracked up to be. When there's an accident on the Autobahn, oh my God, you're going to be stuck for hours. And we were. And there was really some bad weather that slowed everything down to a crawl as well. So it took us 8, almost 9 hours to drive from Munich to Essen. And It was a beautiful drive when the sun was out. And so that was actually really nice. And mad props to Jen. She was an Iron Woman. She did the entire drive from start to finish. Steely-eyed gaze, never took her eyes off the road. And, and driving the Autobahn is also very scary. When you're driving on average 90 or 100 miles an hour, that is definitely not something we're used to when it's going at full speed and, in a rental car. But we eventually made it, roll into Essen at like 9:30 at night, get in, and of course, Ludi Creations has already set up their booth and they've gone home, and Jen hasn't set any of her stuff up. We've only got a few minutes to get anything set up. Huge pressure, huge stress, just on the whole, a really terrible day. We're glad it's behind us, and we're definitely stronger because it didn't kill us. But that was our misadventures in traveling to Essen. Lesson learned: at 4, get to the ferry an hour ahead of time because there's no busier time than at 4 o'clock in the morning for some reason. Who knew? Go figure. And that ends our Essen adventures. And if you guys will be back in a second, we'll be talking about top 10 games that really need an expansion. Be right back. Okay, everybody, welcome back. Sorry to disappoint you, but in between these two sections, I was talking to Jen about, so you need to start thinking about what games you would like to see expansions for. And Jen just stared and stared and stared at the wall of games, none of which she can remember unless it's actually all unpacked and set up in front of her. And even then, she won't remember for a couple of rounds because Jen just doesn't memorize what all these games are. And, so I picked some of her favorites. Like, I know she loves Gates of Loyang, and I said, and it's never really had any kind of significant expansion. I think maybe it's had a couple little promos, and that's it. And, so would you like to see some new stuff for there? And she said, no, it's great as it is. And, and that just kept happening over and over again. And, it was interesting, when I was making this list for games that really need expansion, a lot of I kind of ran into the same thing for a lot of our games where, these games are just complete. They don't need anything more. They're great as it is. In fact, actually, probably one of the most common games that people said, yeah, but what about X? When in the responses to the run-through for this I did a couple of months ago when I did my top 10 games that need expansions was Spyrium. Where's Spyrium? Surely Spyrium. We thought for sure you'd list Spyrium. And in all honesty, I just don't see it. I mean, that game, to me, has enough in it. Every time you play, you're going to get a different, even though you might see for the most part the same overall buildings and, events and all of that, you're going to see them in different orders, and that's going to create enough different combinations that the game has legs. In much the same way that, most Kramer Kiesling games, I don't really think need expansions. Tikal does not need an expansion, even though you could certainly do an expansion, add on different types of things to explore and all that, but the game stands on its own. It doesn't have any hole that needs to be filled. So there is one thing I do need to talk about, because when I did my top 10, one of them I mentioned was Steam Park. And I broke my own rules when I mentioned it, because I said right up front that I was not going to mention games that weren't going to, that as far as I knew, weren't likely to be getting expansions. Now, for some of them, I suspect they're going to expansions, but in all honesty, at this point, I didn't really expect Steamworks was going to get an expansion. And then right after I posted the video, I realized, oh crap, they've already announced they're going to do an expansion. I've even talked about that. I kind of co-announced it for them, so I'd totally forgotten. So Steam Park had to come off my list. And so I had to go back to the drawing board and think some more about a number 10 to put on the list, which would push Star Trek Expedition to number 9. And by the way, Star Trek Expedition, in terms of people responding, was by far the most agreed on. Everybody came out of the woodwork, said, oh my God, yes, Star Trek Expedition, we want to have more content. And again, I would love to have some content too, although I rated it fairly low because I do think the game in and of itself has enough legs that it doesn't need an expansion. New story content would be great, but it doesn't need it. So, but thinking about it, which one am I going to add? Because I had to take Steam Park off the list. And one of them, there was a narrow miss for me that and a couple people suggested it too. And I only didn't put it because it was like my number 11, is Ora et Labora, or work, or was it Prayer and Labor, or at Labora, whatever. Another one of Uwe Rosenberg's excellent series of big, heavy games. And the thing about Ora et Labora is it features a gameplay element that I often complain bitterly about. It has pretty much the exact same setup every single time you play a game. This is the reason we got rid of Caverna. And, I've complained about it in many games. Not that there's anything wrong with it, just that it's not something Jen and I prefer. We always like to see games that have unique variable setups. So every time you sit down at the table in front of a game, you've got a new puzzle to solve. And, that's why some of the, Prosperity made it on the list and whatnot. So Ora et Labora has that problem too. And so I'm going to go ahead and put it at number 10 because I'll be honest, I would love to see it not have this problem. I would love to throw so many new types of buildings you can build in there, like, a nice proper Agricola-style expansion that every time you play, heck, every player has different buildings so that every player has a completely different upgrade path they can follow. Because, of course, in Ora et Labora, even if I can't build a building, when you build it, I can use yours. That would be so amazing, and I do think it could work with it. Now, the reason I didn't put it on the list originally is because Ora et Labora, even though it has non-variable setup, because of the act of me using your buildings, it makes it the game has a lot more variability that evolves during gameplay in two-player. We often find in games like Caverna and others that it's very, very difficult for me and Jen to get that variability because we tend to stick to what we know. If we had a strategy that worked, we tend to do it again. And so we're always looking for games that push us in a different direction. Ora et Labora, there was enough variability built into the game that we didn't need it, but I am going to list it as my number 10 that I really would like to see an expansion for. Not that we ever will, and I'm going to be fine with not seeing it, but that's it. Now, Jen did just walk over. She's been sitting silently the whole time staring at the wall, and I think she has thought of something while eating peanut butter Oreos that she picked up at the grocery store when she went out shopping. So, honey, do you actually have something in mind?
I just want to say I want to see some more dungeon pets.
Some more dungeon pets. That's fair. Now, okay, but... See, now Jen's already forgetting. Dungeon Pets has had an expansion.
I know.
You remember this, right?
I just want to see more cute dungeon pets.
Okay. So you're not necessarily looking for something that fundamentally changes the game, or because that's what the Dungeon Pets expansion that came out added a ton of stuff. It added that whole black market. It added a whole bunch of fundamentally new things. And it's interesting, we really liked all that, but the last time we played Dungeon Pets, we didn't use any of it because we just tended to want to just stick to what we already knew. And it's sort of, while the new expansion did add added several new Dungeon Pets, it added all the other stuff, and you're just saying you want to see another 20 pets.
Yep.
Do you just want to see new art, or do you want to see new functionality? Because remember, the Dungeon Pets expansion, the Dungeon Pets, what was it? There was this core central thing. Oh, I don't remember what it is now. It's been so long since we played with it. But do you want to see pets that kind of fundamentally change the rules, or do you just want to see more pets that just create more variety that work like regular pets?
Both.
Okay. So, but you did think about it. If there was one game you could, demand that the publishers make more expansion content for, it would be Dungeon Pets.
Yes.
And only just really because you want to see some more cuteness.
Mm-hmm. I love the art. It's so clever.
Yep. Okay, folks, there you have it. Our number 11 on the list, Dungeon Pets. And I agree, I would love to see more of it too. Now, me personally, I don't think Dungeon Pets needs an expansion at all. And I was really trying to stay away from I'd like to see one. Although, I did have some like to see ones as well. But yeah, Dungeon Pets, I would love to see some more pets too. I certainly don't disagree with that. But to me, Dungeon Pets could use more expansion content in the way that any game could use more expansion content. Dungeon Pets is a complete whole game. Even if it never had any expansion at all, we would still love that game forever. You can't think of any game on this wall, though, that makes you think, man, I just don't know if I ever want to play it again if they don't create some more content for it.
No.
Because we would have gotten rid of it already if that was the case.
Yep.
So, okay.
These are already the best of the best.
They're the best of the best, folks. You heard it here first. So, that's it. Now, I've also, just the other day, did a top 10 for Civilization games, but I only just put that up. I'll circle back around to that in the next podcast, which will be happening later in the month, somewhere near the end of the month. So, that'll be really interesting because I'm probably going to be doing that podcast on the road. So this is the last thing I need to talk about. I think we're wrapping it up. I already mentioned earlier in the show, I'm going to be at BGG Con this year. And so I'm there in the middle of November, and then since I'll be in the States, I'm going to fly out to the Pacific Northwest to Washington State and spend a couple weeks with my mom, who I haven't seen for, 3 years now, I think. And I'm just going to be helping her out around the house, and maybe I'll be able to play a couple of games, and maybe I'll be able to get a run-through or two during that time, but I doubt it. But one thing I certainly will try to do is my next podcast, wherein, if nothing else, I'll talk about my experiences at BoardGameGeek.com, because BoardGameGeek.com is interesting. This is going to be the first convention I've gone to where I'm going to try to do nothing but play games. I'll do a run-through of the show itself, but I'm going to try and spend as much time playing games as possible, because that's what it is all about. It is not an expansion that's there to just buy games. It's there to play. And the interesting thing is, unlike every other convention I've gone to for the last few years, where I always just go on Board Game Geek and I just ask, hey, does anybody have a couch I could sleep on? Because I'm really cheap. And, and I always end up couch crashing at some place. And that means I'm usually too far away from the convention to be able to do any kind of extracurricular convention activities. But this year, I am actually staying at the hotel in Dallas where the convention is being held. So this will be a very, very different experience for me. I will be able to see, BGG Con after hours. I have no idea what that's going to translate to, but I imagine I'll be reporting it in my next podcast, which I will probably be filming or recording in my mom's living room in Belfair, Washington. Although, one thing I'm definitely going to try to do, we're going to have to spend probably a day filming this before I go. This December, one of the things I picked up at Essen I'm so excited about is the 2015 Advent Calendar. It is literally an Advent calendar that is full of a whole bunch of expansions for board games. And my plan is every day in December to film and open another one of these doors, pull the expansion out, tell you what it's all about, and try to let you, even if you couldn't pick one up, you can kind of get the experience of this board game themed Advent calendar. It's so cool. Now, unfortunately, I'll still be on the road for the first week in December, so I think we're probably going to have to start filming these now, but I'll still put them up on December 1st, December 2nd, December 3rd. So that's something you can be looking forward to. Even if I'm not filming as many games, you're going to be getting a video from me every single day throughout the month of December. And oh my gosh, I gotta say, as excited I am to see my mom, and I'm very excited to see her and hang out and help her with stuff, I am also super stoked to get back to Seattle, which is by far my favorite city in the world. Jen argues, she says London is the best, but I'm sorry, the Emerald City can't be beat. Cannot wait to get a Dick's Deluxe fries and a vanilla shake at Dick's Drive-In. Cannot wait to go to Three Girls Bakery in the Pike Place Market and get a good, proper apple fritter. So much I'm looking forward to doing. And heck, maybe if I've got time, I don't know, I could maybe try and do some travelogue videos about gaming in Seattle. Man, I'd love to go back to Blue Highway Games, which was the board game store that changed Jen's in my life, because that's where I went in looking for Travel Scrabble, but walked out with Pandemic. And that's why I'm even doing this podcast today. So it'd be really kind of cool to go meet them. And actually, I met the owners of that at Essen and talked with them for a little bit. They actually knew the story. They were tickled pink. It's a great shop. I recommend anybody in Seattle go check them out. They're up on Queen Anne Hill. And after you're done, you can swing by Dick's and get a deluxe fries and vanilla shake, because life isn't worth living without that. But that, I think, folks, is going to wrap it up for podcast number 6. Sorry for that whole descent into whatever that was in the middle. But heck, if you guys want to hear more about Jen's and my thoughts about non-related board game stuff, heck, if you want to hear a top 10 about our favorite TV shows or movies, whatever, let me know. questions@rahdo.com. We'll see what we can talk about. And until then, I'm going to end it right there. Hope everybody has a very, very nice day. Thanks very much for listening, everybody. Talk at you later. So long. Bye-bye.